Tammy Marquardt, a woman wrongfully convicted of a crime that she didn't commit. How could the Canadian justice system let an innocent woman spend 14 years in prison for the death of her own son? Tammy's case shows the combination of individual wrongdoings and systemic factors that play a role in the social reality of wrongful convictions. Tammy Marquardt was born in Toronto, Ontario, and raised by a single mother. She grew up in a home where she experienced frequent sexual abuse by her mother's boyfriend, which caused her to leave home at 17 years old. In 1990, she was pregnant with her first child with her boyfriend, Robert Nelson. On May 18, 1991, a 19-year-old Tammy gave birth to her son Kenneth. Unfortunately, the father, Robert Nelson, did not stick around for the birth of the child. Raising a child as a single mother is difficult enough. However, even more difficulties arose when Kenneth began to develop a variety of health complications. He had asthma, pneumonia, and epilepsy. On October 9, 1993, a 21-year-old Tammy let her 2-year-old son take a nap mid-afternoon in her apartment in Oshawa, Ontario. She went to go check up on him because she thought she had heard him faintly call out for her. She arrived at his bedroom and quickly discovered that he was twisted up in the sheets and gasping for air. She called 911 immediately, and the operator instructed her to perform CPR. However, Tammy was under so much stress because of the circumstances, and she couldn't even compose herself. When help arrived, they rushed Kenneth to the hospital, where he was indeed revived. However, doctors concluded that he had suffered brain damage that was irreversible. In very, very tragic circumstances, 3 days after the incident, Kenneth was taken off life support and tragically passed. The Crown began to portray Tammy as a young and inexperienced single mother who lacked financial resources and maintained an unstable relationship with her son's father. She was constructed by the police and prosecution as a dangerous mother simply because she was a single mother who came from a marginalized socioeconomic background. The prejudice against Tammy quickly led to the police and prosecution's tunnel vision, and her circumstances made her an easy target. Before the trial, the Crown prosecutor offered Tammy a plea deal. They wanted Tammy to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence of manslaughter for 5 years. The two defense lawyers for Tammy gave her conflicting advice. One lawyer believed that there was not enough proof to get Tammy convicted. The other lawyer said that she should take the manslaughter plea of 5 years. Tammy Marquardt stated that she told her lawyers, "I have not done anything. Why should I take the offer?" They turned down the offer and went to trial. In 1993, the time of Tammy's son's death, Dr. Charles Smith was the expert of pediatric pathology unit at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, Ontario. In addition, he was the leading expert witness on unexpected and sudden child deaths. Dr. Smith regularly informed the Crown Counsel, police officers, and coroners on pediatric forensic pathology, despite having a lack of formal training in this field. He was instructed to perform the autopsy on Kenneth. After performing the autopsy, Dr. Smith ruled that Kenneth's death was not an accident, despite his numerous health complications throughout his short life. He concluded that the cause of Kenneth's death was asphyxiation and said it was due to suffocation or strangulation. On November 23, 1993, Tammy was arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of her son. Tammy's trial took place in Whitby, Ontario, by a judge and a jury. Dr. Charles Smith testified at trial that Tammy's son died of asphyxiation because of suffocation or strangulation. The Crown centered their case around Dr. Smith's conclusion. The prosecution provided the theory that Tammy had suffocated Kenneth during a moment of stress. The prosecution tried to show that it was easy for a woman in Tammy's stressful circumstances to lose it and strangle her child. This was backed up by Dr. Smith's opinion that Tammy smothered Kenneth and the death was not an accident. Dr. Smith often testified on the characteristics of the individual that would be involved in a child abuse case. When we look back on Tammy's wrongful accusation, we know that the case built against Tammy was based on Dr. Smith's dangerous mother approach. The dangerous mother approach targets single mothers as more likely to cause harm to their children and construct them as evil, selfish, violent individuals who are more likely to be addicted to drugs and alcohol. This approach targets women from marginalized socioeconomic backgrounds and constructs single mothers as dangerous individuals. This view was based on Dr. Smith's own ideas and personal biases of what characteristics a woman must have in order to make a good mother. Tammy's lawyer, James Lockyer, argued that Kenneth had died during an epileptic seizure. Tammy testified at her own trial and maintained her innocence the entire time. Due to Tammy's limited resources, she could not afford an expert witness of her own. Therefore, the defense called no medical expert to help Tammy's case, and they had no one to testify against one of the most well-known expert witnesses in Canada, Dr. Charles Smith. Throughout the trial, the jury received a lot of evidence regarding Tammy's demeanor. The prosecution emphasized Tammy's reaction, emotion, and behavior to losing her child. They discussed her demeanor at the hospital, Kenneth's funeral, and when she was arrested. However, the judge informed the jury not to listen to these arguments because judging someone by what is considered an appropriate reaction is based on a subjective understanding. Despite this, the jury was bombarded with numerous testimonies of how an innocent mother should react to losing a child. On October 24, 1995, the jury decided to find the defendant, Tammy Marquardt, guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for 10 years. Tammy appeals her conviction to the Ontario Court of Appeal. On January 22, 1998, her appeal was dismissed by unanimous court. Legal Aid Ontario declined to provide her with additional funding, and she was unable to make an application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. She tragically had to deal with the death of her son while suffering in prison. Even in jail, Tammy maintained her innocence the entire time. Beginning in 1991, there were growing public concerns about Smith's ability as a forensic pathologist. During the same year, a trial judge acquitted a 12-year-old teen after she was charged with manslaughter based on Dr. Smith's autopsy results of a 16-month-old infant that the young girl was babysitting. The trial judge further criticized Dr. Smith's faulty conclusions during this case. During the 1990s and early 2000s, Smith continued to receive scrutiny, and this was an indication of future measures about to be taken. In 2004, Tammy applied to AIDWIC, the Association in Defense of the Wrongfully Convicted, formerly known today as Innocence Canada. She was introduced by her lawyer, James Lockyer. By this time, AIDWIC was already suspicious of Dr. Charles Smith's conclusions in many other cases as well. Over the years, there were numerous growing concerns about the accuracy of Smith's work. In April of 2005, AIDWIC wrote Dr. Barry McLellan, who was the chief coroner for Ontario, and Michael Bryant, the Attorney General at the time, and requested a full public inquiry into Dr. Smith's work. On June 2005, Dr. McLellan announced a press release that stated a full review would be done into the work of Dr. Smith. The review would include criminally suspicious cases and child deaths where the autopsy was done by Smith. At this time, Tammy had already spent 10 years in prison. As part of the Chief Coroner's Review, this would be a forerunner of a broader inquiry into pediatric forensic pathology, generally known as the Gouge Inquiry. In addition, a doctor of forensic medicine was assigned to review Tammy Marquardt's case. In 2007, Dr. Succo, a doctor of forensic medicine, decided to review the case. He ruled that Smith's findings of asphyxia were illogical and completely against scientific evidence-based reasoning. Additionally, Dr. Succo testified that the evidence that Smith gave at Tammy's trial was unprofessional and misleading. On April 30th, 2009, the Supreme Court of Canada ordered that the case be brought to the Ontario Court of Appeal for consideration of the new evidence and to determine whether Tammy's conviction was a miscarriage of justice. This process took 2 years, but on June 7, 2011, the Ontario Court of Appeal quashed her conviction and ordered a new trial for February 10, 2012. Before the new trial could begin, the Crown withdrew the charges against Tammy. This was largely based on the new evidence provided by experts. After a long and hard battle, Tammy was a free woman. However, there are certain parts of her that will never fully heal. It is hard enough to deal with the death of your own child. However, also being wrongfully accused of that death and labeled as a baby killer is something a mother should never have to deal with. Now that we have a thorough understanding of Tammy's case, we are going to explore the factors that led Tammy to a wrongful conviction. The first factor is Tammy's marginalization. As I previously mentioned, Tammy was seen by the police and prosecutors as an easy target. She deviated from societal norms of what the stereotypical mother should look like. First, she was from a marginalized socioeconomic background. She grew up in an environment with frequent sexual abuse, she lacked financial resources, maintained an unstable relationship with her son's father, and she was a young and inexperienced single mother. The police and prosecutors saw these as signs that she was an unfit mother who couldn't cope with her lack of financial resources and support, and then they painted her for the jury that it would be easy for her to strangle her son. They accused her of a crime that didn't even occur due to their own personal biases about mothers who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. James Lockyer, Tammy's lawyer and founding director of AIDWIC, said that there was an overwhelming similarity in all the people he helped exonerate. He states that most of the victims, if not all of them, were easy marks. Tammy was a good example of an easy mark. She was young, single mother, and she was impoverished. The second factor is the frequent demeanor evidence that was used against Tammy. The prosecution emphasized Tammy's reaction, emotion, and behavior to losing her child. They discussed her demeanor at the hospital, Kenneth's funeral, and when she was arrested. The jury was bombarded with numerous testimonies about how an innocent mother should react to losing her child. It also shows gender bias, how innocent mothers are supposed to break down and cry. Due to Tammy not adjusting to the stereotype of women being caring, nurturing, emotional mothers, she was automatically seen as guilty. Everyone handles their emotions differently when going through a traumatic event, and demeanor cues can be a distracting and unreliable method to assess someone's guilt. Demeanor evidence increases the potential for wrongful prosecutions and convictions. The third factor is tunnel vision. The tunnel vision of the police and prosecution made them more concerned with constructing a story about how Tammy was a dangerous mother rather than seeking the truth of what actually happened. In addition, due to the thinking dirty approach that pathologist Charles Smith and his colleagues used, other possibilities for Kenneth's death were completely disregarded. They approached this case focusing exclusively on Tammy as the main suspect and the high suspicion of child abuse. Various warning signs such as Kenneth's health complications and pre-existing conditions were ignored, in addition to the more likely possibility of his death as a result of an epileptic seizure. The fourth factor was forensic error and tainted medical evidence by Dr. Charles Smith. We now know that Dr. Charles Smith played a huge factor in Tammy's wrongful conviction. Dr. Charles Smith lacked knowledge in forensic pathology and did not visit the crime scenes in his cases to gather evidence. He had no formal training in injury identification and was not qualified to conduct an autopsy. However, even despite this, Smith had been so highly respected in his field that many defense attorneys told their clients that they couldn't win if Smith testified against them. In addition, the defense lacked their own expert witness that could have refuted his inaccurate conclusions. In addition, we also now know that the case built against Tammy was due to Dr. Charles Smith's own personal biases, which influenced his inaccurate and faulty conclusions. Later at the Gouge inquiry, Gouge stated that Charles Smith, partly because of his reputation and partly because of what he told juries, a number of his convictions probably were based in a significant measure on his opinions. As I previously mentioned, Dr. Charles Smith and his dangerous mother approach targets single mothers as more likely to cause harm to their children and constructs them as evil, selfish, and violent individuals who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. This approach was based on Dr. Charles Smith's own ideas and biases of what characteristics a woman must have to make a good mother, and this greatly influenced his forensic work and conclusions on many cases, including Tammy's. The fifth and final factor is systematic and institutional failures. Not only was the forensic pathology flawed in this case, but so is the system in which it allowed it to operate. The political, economic, and social factors that lead to the marginalization of certain groups in society cannot be ignored and play a significant factor in this wrongful conviction. The wrongdoings of police officers, prosecutors, and expert witnesses were prevalent in Tammy's case, However, they are enforced by the larger macroscopic issue of systematic bias and social inequality in Canadian society. On that note, we can conclude many of these factors overlap and are interdependent to create the miscarriage of justice that was present in Tammy's wrongful conviction. Unfortunately, there are plenty of other cases similar to Tammy's, and the exact number of people falling victim is unknown. Tammy Marquardt's case helps us shed light on the injustices and flaws within our criminal justice system. We need to increase our awareness for ourselves and others around us by working together as a society to prevent these injustices before they occur. Because remember, next time it could be you falling victim to a wrongful conviction.